The Unfiltered by Jade.
Jade.
Welcome to the Unfiltered by Jade, where we get out of the box and dive into topics that are sidelined. I look forward to entertain, educate, and inspire. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, donate, and make everybody know about this.
Beats by RB Records, a proud sponsor of The Unfiltered by Jade.
Welcome back to the Unfiltered by Jade. Today, we have one of my fellow podcasters here, and we are going to be speaking about a topic that I guess some persons can relate to. Not everybody, but some persons can relate to. And I guess we can see where some of our issues lie because I'm also a product of this. So we're going to have a great conversation going in. So, hello there on the other side.
Hi, Jade. Thank you for having me on air today. I'm really excited to talk about this episode or to dive into this episode that we're going to dive into today. I think this is a great
Yes.
topic, and I think it's something that people all over experience for sure.
Definitely. So, tell them about yourself and your podcast.
Yes. So my name is JCamille, and I am the podcast host for the Shift podcast,
Mm-hmm.
which is a podcast here to help you adjust to the new. The Shift is a weekly podcast that helps us transition through the process. So, whether it's from college to career, relocating to a new city or a new country, or adjusting from singleness to marriage, the goal of the Shift is to address and remove any fears and obstacles that prevent us from moving into our purpose and to empower us with the mindset, skills, and knowledge to be successful in this stage of our life.
Well, she gave us everything a while ago, though. And I used to help to host a concert called Shifting the Atmosphere.
That's so
Yeah.
ironic.
Yeah, it is. It is. All right, so let's go. At what age did you know that your parents were getting a divorce? And did they explain why?
So I was 3 years old when my parents got divorced, and they did not explain why. It was more or less just like, oh, well, mom got a job here, and dad is going to stay and work here. And that's really all I was told. And so that didn't make any sense to me as a child, but I kind of just went with it. I trusted my parents, and I ended up going with my mother. But that was really quite an adjustment to make for sure.
Yeah, I mean, at that age, I don't know if anybody really knows how to explain to a child at that age what is happening.
Yeah, like, and
Do
there are
you do
bits
you
and
think
pieces.
do you think that there's a way that they could have probably explained it?
Personally, probably at that age, no. I'm trying to think, because I guess it would have helped if they would have at least told me why we had to move. Because
Mm.
I mean, I understand. Okay, each parent had to work at different places, but kids also, part of you is just like, well, I thought mommy was working in this state, the same state that dad was working in. So why are we moving? And that I think was like the big shocker for me. Like there are bits and pieces of my childhood that like I remember from that age, obviously at 3, and I remember that ride, like riding with my mom to a different state and my sister, like, we had the U-Haul and everything. Like I vividly remember that. And I just remember thinking like, why are we moving? And so if
Mm-hmm.
someone maybe would have better explained that, I think that would have
Mm-hmm.
helped. Now, as for them in a marriage, I don't think they could have explained to me like, oh, we're not a good fit for each other. At 3 years old, I probably would have just cared about playing with my baby dolls and not
Right.
have paid them any mind.
Right. Right. I mean, that's understandable. So, when it is that you were leaving, because I'm just getting the information now. So, when it is that you were leaving, and I mean, you were leaving your dad behind, how did you feel?
Honestly, it didn't click for me
Okay.
until I was at school, and I
Mm-hmm.
was 4 years old at school, and I remember like those first days. So when everyone's like, oh, it's your child's first day at school, and typically both parents go together, even if they're co-parenting, nowadays you see both the mother and the father take their children to school. and
Right.
it was just my mom. And or it would be like my mom and my nana taking me to school in pre-K. And I think that's when it started to hit for me that my dad's not here. And I started to, then go to explore those other thoughts of, well, he's not coming to get me. I'm going to be left behind, because I saw everyone else's mother and father coming to take them to school, pick them up to school, or pick them up after school. And then I lived in a military town as well. So that
Mm-hmm.
didn't help, because I always had those surprise, visits that would happen that you see on YouTube, where that one
Right.
parent comes from overseas and the child starts crying and running to them. That happened all the time. And
Oh
typically
boy.
it was the father that was in the military, not the mother. So just imagine seeing everyone else's dad come pick them up from school and them run into their daddy's
Mm.
arms and everything. And I, to this day, cannot recall a single day that my dad has picked me up from school, because he hasn't.
Wow. What was the emotional impact of the divorce on you? Both. Let's look at both as a child and an adult, if you can remember.
Oh, I can remember. As a child, I started to resent my father
Okay.
because, like I said, I saw everyone's dads come to get them. And so that sadness then started to turn into anger. And
Mm.
I became angry and bitter and upset that he wasn't there. And
Right.
I'm not gonna give my dad, throw my dad under the bus completely. He was just in a different state, so he did come visit like once or twice a year, or my mom would go take me to where he was, but it still just wasn't the same. And
Yeah.
yeah, like, because I'm like, they get to see their parents like every day, or if he's gone, he's gone out serving for our country, and you're not doing that. Like, I could understand their father's reasons more for not
Right.
being there than my
Right.
own. And so I started to become very angry. And I mean, I remember it was one time I went to go visit my father, and it was like around Christmas time, which is funny. We're recording and it's not too far from
Mm-hmm.
Christmas. And my brother, because my brother and I have two different mothers with the same father. So he was
Okay.
there. And my brother, he lived in the same city my dad did. And I just remember like watching them. And, I'm thinking to myself, oh, he must have like so much great of a bond with my brother than he does with me. And then my dad was also dating someone who had children. And I mean, I saw how comfortable
Mm.
they were around him. And I just became upset. And I'm like, I'm the baby. Like, I'm supposed to
Right.
be daddy's girl. Like, what is going on here? Who are all these other people? And
Right.
I remember I got upset. What else didn't add to it was because there were a few birthdays that my dad didn't show up for. And
Oh,
he told me he
jeez.
was going to show up for. And the worst thing you can do to a child, especially because I'm big on 2 days, like out of the entire year, my birthday and Christmas. I don't know why, those have just always been my 2 days since I was a child.
Mm.
And so
Understood.
so when it was my birthday, like, first of all, you're my dad. You know when my birthday is. So I don't have to
Right.
remind you every year and say,
Right.
"Hey, are you going to come? Are you going to be there?" And then my birthday also happens to fall right around President's Day weekend. So usually I'm out of school a day. Sometimes people are off of work, or usually people take off of work around that time. That is not that hard. You could make it work in your schedule. But it was like 3 or 4 birthdays he had missed in a row.
Wow.
And I just remember by the last one, I think I was 9. And I told him, I was like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. And he called my mom's house and her cell phone. He called my grandmother's house, because my grandmother lived not that far from my mom and my sister and I. And every
Right.
time he would call, I was like, no, I'm not coming to the phone. Or I would say, like, I was in the restroom or something, because I was never disrespectful to my mom. So if she forced me to take the phone, then I would. But
Right.
to get around that, I would just go to the bathroom, and I would go lock myself in the bathroom, and because I didn't want to talk to him. And
Right.
that's really what happened during my childhood. And I don't think we got through that until he ended up driving down to where I was, because I was not talking to him.
Well, at least he did that.
Yeah. And then as an adult, emotionally, as an adult, now we have a much better bond, but it was
Mm-hmm.
hard. I feel like the emotional impact impacted my stepfather more than it did my father when I became an
Mm.
adult. Because my stepfather, I remember when I went to counseling,
Mm-hmm.
and my counselor and I, we were talking about my dad, and not in a bad way. I was just trying to heal from the past. And
Right.
she was like, "You need to understand who your dad is, and the pretty much the picture that you're wanting him to paint, he doesn't have the colors to paint it."
Right.
And that was hard for me to understand because I was still painting in my head this perfect family picture that I had, imagined up as a child. And I had
Right.
to come to terms that day that this is never going to happen. And
Mm.
so as I came to terms with that, then she started to talk to me, and she was like, "But the colors to paint that picture have been there all along. You just haven't realized it because you weren't
Mm.
opening yourself up to have the capacity to accept it." And that was from my
Right.
stepfather. And
Right.
so the more, I would say, emotional impact of the divorce was more on him, because as I was shutting out my dad, in
You
my
were
head,
shutting
I'm
him
like,
up.
"Oh, all men are bad."
Yes.
So I was shutting him out too. And
Mm-hmm.
my stepfather is the most, I mean, both of my dads are great now, but when I was younger, like, he's the most amazing person ever. Like, I never got a spanking from my stepfather. Only from my mom. And then because I'm a girl and the baby girl out of my sister and I, like, I was spoiled. I still am. And my stepfather, he was amazing. Like, he took me to my dance practices. He took me to, like, I did volleyball. He took me to those practices. And I think in my head, because I was still so bitter, that I'm like, "Oh, my dad's not here." I was not accepting
Mm.
all along that he was really playing that role. And
Right.
so I think now the emotional impact is, or what I've had to adjust to is, okay, realizing I have two fathers and letting
Right.
them both be in my life, and both, bring their colors to the table and paint the picture in a different way.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It took a lot of growth to get there, though. And
And yeah, and I'm happy that at least your stepdad was wavering in how he felt, in even in his responsibilities, because we know that sometimes when kids behave a particular way, especially when they're not accepting, step parents tend to want to sometimes withdraw or not bother with
Mhm.
it. But I'm a stepmother, so I can tell you. I can tell you how that goes. So sometimes step parents tend to want to withdraw also, or but I'm happy that at least he did a waiver in doing that.
Yeah, no, he was amazing, and he still is. Like, he's there's been so many times where my friends have actually thought that he's my biological father because
Because
of how
dad.
close we are and because of how such of a great father he is.
Very nice, very nice. What part of your life was significantly affected most?
I feel like it was really two parts. So
Okay.
one, those, like, elementary years, those formative years,
Mm-hmm.
um, because that's literally where the bitterness and the resentment started.
Right.
And then also probably late middle school, early high school, when,
Okay.
the opposite sex starts to become interested in you, and
Right.
you start to become interested in them.
Right.
And I just didn't realize how much the divorce really affected me in terms of trust,
Mm. Right.
that I was not trusting of the opposite sex. Like, oh my gosh, there's relationships that I can recall, and I just knew I was Miss Perfect Queen. No one could tell me anything wrong, and especially, like, my first relationship. Well, honestly, the first two.
Mm,
that the divorce, it really affected me because I didn't trust my dad since he wasn't
right.
showing up for the birthdays. And so it was like if that particular guy did any one thing wrong, I was like, oh
Mm-hmm.
no, like throw him out. Like I can never
Yes.
trust you again for the rest of my life. And it could have
Okay.
been something small. Like my first boyfriend, we were dating in high school. And so he would like meet me outside of my classes to walk me to my next one. It could have been something as small as that. And like him not showing up for one
Mm-hmm.
class.
Yep. Throw
And
it
I'm
all
like,
away. Throw it
right.
all away.
I'm like, throw him away to the trash. Yeah, like those poor guys.
I mean, the truth is, you were hurt, you were hurting. So it translated into that aspect. So if they didn't really know what was happening, I mean, at that age, nobody really knows how to deal with these things.
Yeah, yeah,
But we
that's
thank
true.
God, but we thank God for growth. Before
Yes.
we go on, yes, yes. Before we go on to the next question, let's go for a short break and come right back. Shopping Assistance Jamaica takes the stress away. Our services include online and local shopping in Jamaica for individuals and businesses, personal shopping, purchasing of company and office supplies, importing and exporting small packages across Jamaica and worldwide, helping you to find unique gifts and items for all events and occasions. Contact us at 876 919 5195. Shopping Assistance 2015 at gmail.com. Follow Shopping Assistance on Instagram at Shopping Assist JA, at Twitter at Shopping Assist 5, and Facebook at The Shopping Assistance. Shopping Assistance, your style, your budget. Welcome back to the Unfiltered by Jade. We're speaking to JCamille, and we're talking about how divorce affects our future relationships. And we know it definitely does, especially in the area of trust.
Hmm.
Yeah, trust me, I understand that. Because for me, I think it's the same thing where I'm concerned, where trusting men, and it's not that I was close to my dad. My dad died, but I was close to my dad. So even when it is that he and my mom were separated, and the divorce thing, I was still close to my dad. I mean, I was angry, and it happened when I was an adult and married.
Mm.
So I was angry. I knew that they were gonna get a divorce. We all knew. But when it actually does happen, it's a different situation than just knowing and then it happening. Two different things. Um, so I do understand, and I mean, it's the opposite. I was closer to my dad than my mom. So with trust, I mean, I generally have a problem with trust. Generally, it doesn't matter who. I have a problem with trust
Same.
generally. Yes. So I definitely do understand where you're coming from with that. I do.
Yeah, I think it affected all of my relationships because, like, as much as I'm talking about, okay, like dating with the opposite sex, I also
Mm-hmm.
think it affected my friendships because, I mean, I remember like one of my friends like talking to me and they're like, Jasmine, you're being kind of controlling. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm not being controlling. Like, I'm not controlling anyone. Everyone can do what they want.
Mm.
And they were like, no, you let people do what they want, but then the outcome is if it's not what you expect it to be and how what you in my head, what I trusted them to do, and
Right.
then I would get upset. And the truth is,
Mm.
I just have to trust whatever task or thing that I need them to do, and likewise them for me, that it's going to get done. But if it doesn't, if I ask them to do A, B, C, that doesn't mean it has to happen in that order. they can do it in CBA,
And
BCA,
it still happens.
exactly. But my friend, she really just put me on the spot one day, and she was like, "You're being controlling," and
Well,
I
I'm happy that you have that kind of friend.
that's true. Yeah, that's really true. But I think that's oftentimes some of the fruit that comes from the bad fruit that comes from not trusting that we don't even realize.
Yeah, I mean, that is a fruit of it because we want to control our situations. I want to ensure that they go a particular way because we're used to them not going that way. So we tend to want to, we tend to want to be, so what is it called? We have an A-type personality where we want it to be directed this way. It has to be that way. And it's
Mhm.
because we don't trust anything outside of what we think it should be. And what it is that we have seen is things that have failed us before. So we're trying to ensure that we do it a particular way so it doesn't fail us, it doesn't messes us up, and we are okay because we're trying to protect us. So if it's done a different way than how we want it to be, we then have an issue.
And we
Yeah,
start to
we
freak
do.
out because we're
Oh,
like, what's
yes.
going on? You're not doing it in the way that I thought you were going to do it.
Stories about that. But let me reserve those.
No,
How did
absolutely.
how did you manage this in terms of, or how are you managing this in terms of your friendships and your intimate relationships? How are you managing this?
I really think what helped me was going to counseling. And
Okay.
I didn't go to counseling until I was 21. And
Mm.
I'm that so that was 2 years ago. I'm 23.
Okay.
So it's not like I've been going my entire life, but I wish I would have, or at least younger, because I think it would have helped me. Because I was actually coming to the counselor to talk about my past relationships and
Mm-hmm.
why those weren't going how I thought they would go. And then at the time, my father and I weren't talking again. And this isn't a common thing that we do, but
Mm-hmm.
we had just got into a really, really bad argument. And
Mm.
so we weren't talking again. And so, the counselor is just doing her job and asking me to tell her about myself, about my upbringing, blah, blah, blah. And so as we get to talking, she's like, yeah, it's not about the guys. Where it's about let's go with your dad. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm over here looking at her like, this is not what I'm paying you for. Like,
That's right.
we're supposed to be talking about the relationship with the guys here. And then I just really, she got to the root of the situation. And so if I
Yes.
would suggest anything to anyone, it would be to get to the root of it. And the root of it for me was the divorce, as well as the actions that took place after the divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Because, for lack of better words, let's just say one parent changed and one didn't for a long
Right.
time. And
Right.
so to still see that unchanging parent
Right.
continue to like do the actions that they did.
Right.
And I guess, I mean, I hate to like throw people under the bus, but I have to be a little bit more honest for the listeners to like understand. It was my
Right.
father. And so then that already added to the bitterness and
Right.
resentment that I
Yes.
had
Yes.
because he
Yes.
didn't
Yes.
show up. And then how he treated the opposite sex then
Hmm.
also began to make me look at myself differently and
Right.
how he might think of me, because I'm my father's only daughter. And
Okay.
so it's like, the brothers and me. And so when I saw how he treated people of the opposite sex, I'm like, oh, well, then he must not think much of me.
Right. Right. Right.
And
Have you ever related that to him?
I did, in one sense or another. I pretty
Mm-hmm.
much, in one of our arguments, I was like, I'm going to need you to stop treating women like this, or you can't be around my future kids. So it wasn't even necessarily me. I got in this mindset of starting to think legacy, and I wasn't dating anyone or anything at the time, but I was just like, I can't trust sending my future kids around you and them to spend a week with you or a month with you or whatever. Because, people send their kids home for the summer or something with the grandparents, and I'm like, I can never see myself doing that if you don't change.
Right, but I think you should probably let him know that it affects you personally instead of putting it to say your kids, because I mean, he might change before your kids come, but he's affecting you. So, in terms of saying, yeah, if you're continuing like this, I won't want you around my kids. Probably you can say, well, you can probably say the way how I see you treating other women, I feel like that's the same way you treat me. You discard me the same way. Probably he will understand then. But you relating it to your kids, he's probably not getting the picture. Sometimes we have to be straight shooters and let them understand where we are at and what we're saying. But
Yeah,
funny
that's
thing
true.
is, funny thing is, for divorce, I was hurt when my parents got divorced. I mean, we all knew that they were gonna do it, but it happened, and the way it wasn't a nice divorce.
Mhm.
um, but and I was hurt about it. But when I understood about it when I got divorced, yes, I like a bell rung in my head, and I was like, ding, okay, I get it. I
Oh
get
my
it. Yes, I get it. So sometimes if it is that kids, and I'm not wishing it on anybody, but sometimes if we don't experience it for yourself, you have no idea what your parents are going through, why they did what they did. So we as kids are angry and upset and mad, and that it happened, and how could you do this? But then I am the one that decided to divorce my ex-husband. So now, if I had kids, they probably did the same thing to me. How could you do this, whatever it is, without understanding? And sometimes, as parents, we don't want to go into much details with our kids because my parents never really. We were all adults, but they really did not want to go into details with us either. You know, about everything. Although we're not blind, so we saw. But
Yeah.
and I
Although
mean,
to an extent, I feel like maybe I don't know what age it's appropriate, but I feel like to an extent it's okay to give your kids some sort of explanation because I think for the longest, and maybe even in what you just said, where you were like, oh, Jay, maybe you should address that with him and how that makes you
mm-hmm,
feel. I
mm-hmm,
think because as a child, I was always told by my mom, oh well he's a good person or he's a good this. It's like you start to learn. I saw my mother put her feelings aside for me, and so then I
ah.
picked up that same thing of like, oh, well, I'm just going to put my feelings aside and take him how he is. And, the only thing that'll work is if I talk to him about my future kids rather than about me. And
But
so,
is that what she was doing, or was she trying not to allow you to hate him? Because if it is, and I think I understand where she is, where that's concerned, or why she did that, to say, he's a good parent, he's whatever. But because I mean, I don't have any kids for my ex, but if I'm talking to persons about him, I would say that he's a good person, he's whatever. And I think it is just to not make people dislike him or to hate him, or as a child, to not put the child in the position of, oh well, I hate that because he did this, and he's a good person, just not good for me. And
yeah,
I do agree with you that parents should at least say something to their kids about why or what happened. Because I mean, he's a good person, so why in God's name are you getting a divorce if he's a good person? Am
right,
I missing something? Am
right.
I missing something?
No, I think what you're saying, no, that's true. I think what would have helped the most, and I have a cousin who's going through this right now. He's in the process of going through a divorce, and he has an 11-year-old with his soon to be ex-wife, and
Okay.
they sat down and talked to her, and it was like more or less like both sides. And I think that probably would have helped. Now I'm not gonna say there's a perfect answer, remedy, or way, but I think
Mm-hmm.
when I heard one parent saying, "Oh, well, he's not a bad person. He's not a bad person." And then the other parent just said nothing about it. And
Mm.
I literally how I found out what happened was just observation. And
Mm.
I remember I was with my dad, and we were at his current girlfriend's house, and
Right.
I got my hair wet, and I'm a little black girl, so my hair got messed up. And so she was like, "Oh, well, I'll braid your hair for you or something, like fix my hair." And so I was like, "Okay." And as she was fixing my hair, and my dad had left the room, let us girls be. And
Mm-hmm.
she just started talking to me and was like, saying how she remembered me from when I was a child or pictures in my house or whatever. And I'm little, like I'm 6. And I'm like, wait,
Mm.
what? And I started to then like put pieces and equations and
Together.
all of it together in my head, and I'm like, whoa, how do you know what my mom looks like? How did you see me as
Yeah,
all,
yeah,
all of
no.
this? And that
Mm-mm.
was hard. And I actually, because I was in just such shock and I didn't know what to do, I did not speak to anyone about that situation for 2 years. I did not.
Wow.
Yeah, I did not talk, and the first person I talked to was actually my mom, not my dad. But it's because it took me so long to try to figure it out, and then I was trying to convince myself like, "Oh no, surely that didn't happen," or maybe they were just all friends, and just trying to take the high road.
But I really don't think any of that should really come from her, though. I don't think, and that's my personal view, that she probably should have had that conversation with you.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
I guess she was trying to have girl talk, but you can't do that. I mean, this thing is so delicate. It's so delicate. It is
Yeah.
so delicate because even now with my girls, so when we're doing stuff together, I don't say anything. I mean, it wasn't a situation where my husband no was cheating or anything, but in terms of even how we met and whatever it is, I mean, I'm so careful to say certain things, um because I know that it has been a while now that their mom and dad is no longer together or whatever, but
Yeah.
they are still, they wanted that perfect thing, and it's no longer there. And after a couple years or so, now their dad is married and it's not to their mom anymore, and I
Yeah.
understand how they would feel. I can understand how it would feel, because I remember an adult being married when my dad was saying, oh, after his divorce he probably get married. I told him, well, I'm not coming to your wedding.
Oh my
So,
god.
and I was in my 20s, so I can imagine how children younger than that would actually feel about the whole thing, So yeah, I really don't think that was from her place, because that would have traumatized you.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely did traumatize me, and that
Yeah.
was why I'm like, I just wish both parents would have had the conversation with me, because
Yeah.
then when I did bring it to my mom, it was like at that point she was kind of like, "Oh man, like cat's out the bag. I've been doing everything I could to kind of guard you from
Yeah.
this, and you
Yeah.
found out." And especially my mom, like major shout out to her. So my mom's dad passed away because he was in the military. And so
Okay.
he passed away when she was younger as like a child. And so because
Mm.
of that, she just did everything she could to make sure I had a relationship with my dad. So that's why
Okay.
she was always like, okay, he's a great person. He's this. And so when I found out, it was like, she's looking at me and I'm looking at her, and it's like you can't say anything to cover that up. Like
Right.
I know the truth now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 8. And so that's why I think that even added to the year after when I turned 9 and I was like, I'm not talking to him anymore. Like
Right.
all of that bitterness and rage and
Mm-hmm.
anger
Mm-hmm. And I
was
mean, it's
there.
expected. It is expected.
Yeah. And then when I talked to him about it, he was just like, oh, who told you that? And I'm like, yeah, I just told you who told me that. And he's like, well, she's just making up stuff. Like he did not take ownership. And I think that was the hardest part for me, was because my dad did not take ownership
But how could he come and tell
until,
it? How could he come and tell his baby daughter that now? Huh?
I mean,
How could he? He would have broken your heart.
but
And
it was
especially when
already
he's,
broken. And
yeah, but
so
he did not want to confirm that. He didn't want to confirm it, because, and I'm not picking up for him and saying it's right. I'm just saying, mighty God, how do you do that?
I mean, that's true. And I'm not in the roles of the shoes of a parent, because yeah, I don't know how that feels. But I would just, I don't know, just admitting you're wrong in something. Because here's how, like, my parents, both of them actually, if I do something wrong, it's more or less, or any parent in the world, if a child does something wrong, either you own up to it, or you typically get put on punishment anyways. And you probably
Hmm.
get put on more punishment if you don't own up to it. For some people, it's a timeout. For me, it was a spanking. So
Mm.
I'm like, I didn't want to get in trouble, so I typically own up to it. So how can
Right.
you raise a child to own up to their wrong, but
And
then
you're doing the wrong.
in you as an adult, you don't.
Hmm.
Like, I get it, you
Yeah.
don't want to make me feel bad, and even though I'm already feeling bad, but then if you don't tell me, oh, you're right, I was in the wrong, or I made a mistake, then you have me feeling bad for, feeling delusional, or
Mm-hmm.
that I brought it to my mom. Like, I felt so horrible that I even
Oh
talked to my
no.
mom about it, but it's just because my mom and I are so close that I didn't know
Right.
who else to talk to. But it was like,
Right.
first of all, I watched my mom get through the divorce and that be hard for her. And then,
Mm.
to observe how having that conversation was with her, I felt horrible. So then, as when I bring it to my father and you don't even want to take any ownership, I just felt like the bad guy all around. Like, for the longest, well, I don't want to say for the longest, but probably in my middle school years when I was trying to figure out my identity, I
Mm-hmm.
started to question, to an extent, slight suicidal, but not bad. But it was like, why am I here?
Right.
Because, then I started to say, well, man, if I wasn't here, they would not have to see each other anymore for the rest of their life.
Right.
And
Oh
you
dear.
just go through like those thoughts where the truth is, if the parent just owned up that, you know what, hey, I was in the wrong, but that has nothing to do with the relationship that I want to establish with you, and they still would have tried to pursue that relationship, I think it would have been a much different outcome.
Have you ever said that to him?
I've said bits and pieces, but the way
Uh-uh. You see, like how you just told me a while ago, that's how you need to go into these things. Yeah.
yeah, I think the hard part is really when I say, like, one parent is unchanging and the other one has changed and grown. It's now like that unchanging parent is getting there, but it's definitely not overnight. So I still
Mm-hmm.
think to this day they don't think all of what they did was wrong.
And I mean, we have to reach a point sometimes because sometimes they won't ever admit it. So we're going to have to also reach a point where we're going to forgive because forgiveness is not for them, it's for us.
Mhm.
And we need to forgive ourselves for even holding on to their mistakes. You know what I mean? Because the truth is, when we're holding on to their mistakes and it is making us angry and resentful, they're moving on with their lives.
You're right. Yeah.
Definitely. Yes.
I
So
think
we
that
have
was
to.
the hardest part, though, in my teenage years. Was
Hmm.
it was when I was 12, and I vividly remember us having another argument, which, yeah, my dad brings these arguments upon himself. Let me just say that. Uh, and when I was 12, I was so excited because I had went to this music camp, and it was in Arkansas, and where the camp was at, it was a good halfway point for both of my parents.
Hmm.
So at the end of the music camp, there's always this production. So I was like, okay, perfect. My dad can come, my mom can come. For once in my life, both of my parents can see my musical or whatever it was that I was doing.
Hmm.
And this man tells me he was coming
And didn't show up.
and didn't show up. And because I was 12, because I was allowed to have a Facebook when I was 12, I could see that he was like in like Tennessee or something with a woman that he was dating. And
Oh dear God.
I'm like, what? And it started to really like affect. I'm like, do you not think I'm worth showing up for
Hmm.
over this person? And so, oh, yes, so many of those conversations, blowouts, arguments. And that's why I'm like, to this day, there are things that he sees that was wrong. And there are things that I just had to come to terms with, that he's never going to see it. So I
Yep.
just don't even bring up the conversation. Like, yes, I've forgiven him. Yes, I've let them go. But I don't even bring up the conversation because I already know his eyes are closed to it.
Yeah, and sometimes we have to not have expectations of them. But I mean, it's sad to say, sad to say. And as I say, I'm sure your dad is a great dad. Otherwise,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's really sometimes we have to just not have expectations because we're gonna get let down, especially if it is that we have been getting let down for my God, for how long? and it doesn't seem to be changing. It if they come, they come. If they don't come, that's fine. And it doesn't bother us. We have to reach a stage. I mean, it's hard to say, and it's really hard to come to terms with. But it's so for our sanity, for our sakes, we need to we need to sometimes just say, hey, you know what? Okay, if you come, fine. If you don't, it's nothing personal. That's okay. And we have to learn to be okay with that.
You must be a
Because
counselor. My counselor said that.
um and I am, but we're not going there. Because this
Triggered.
counselor couldn't help herself when she was going through it.
Oh, well, I mean, sometimes though, when we're too close to something, it's different.
Well, just like our doctor can't give themselves medications, a counselor can't counsel themselves, really.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
absolutely.
we have to go to counsel our own self. Right.
I can.
So, upon wrapping up, are there any takeaways from this journey that you have had?
So many. I would say one for sure, either go to counseling or find a trusted person to talk to. And
Okay.
especially if you are, if this happened to you in your childhood,
Mm-hmm.
or if you are like a teen or child listening to this, find a trusted person to talk to. I
Mm-hmm.
remember what helped me. I had an aunt, my mom's sister. When I was younger, she would pick me up on the weekends and we'd have like our sleepovers. And at the end, we would have what's called secret time. And
Okay.
it was just me and my aunt, and whatever I said in that room, and we had like a little teddy bear, so whoever was holding the teddy bear shared a secret.
Mm-hmm.
And and it was just a venting space and an open door that
Right.
helped me so much. So I would just say find someone to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
That's number one. Number two, I would say don't be afraid to trust. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
is not the same.
Right.
And I really wish I would have learned that and known that when I think back on some past relationships, friendships, um,
Right.
everything. Everyone is not the same, and everyone doesn't have it in their head or doesn't have intentions to hurt you. Those that are saying, I truly want to be in this friendship with you, that means that think of the idea of the ship, like relationship, friendship. They want to
Right.
join in with you and,
Right.
accomplish the same goals and missions and tasks as you. That means that they're not coming to hurt you. They have pure
Right.
intentions. Now, also use discernment too, because, some people
Mm-hmm.
don't. But I would just
Yep.
say in general, don't be afraid to trust because of one person's misdoing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, third, when it comes to being a product of this situation, recognize that your parents aren't bad people, they're just broken people. Um,
Ooh.
and
Yes.
I heard someone say that to me, and they that stuck with me because I was like, you know what? Now that I'm at the age that I'm an adult and I can look back on some things, there are
Mm-hmm.
some broken cycles, or not broken cycles, but cycles on each side that my parents had. There are cycles that my mom carries, there are cycles that my dad carries. And I can see now how it played a role in their lives and how it played a role in their marriage because they did
Hmm.
not come to the marriage, and they'll both admit this to you now. That is one thing for sure in my adulthood. We've had this conversation. They both came to the marriage not as whole individuals,
Ah.
not as healed individuals. You
Yes.
had my brother and I are like 2.5 years apart. So my dad was fairly recent out of being with my
Right.
brother's mom. My
Right.
mom was fairly recent out of being with my sister's dad. And,
Mm.
and it wasn't necessarily a rebound. I'm not going to say that, but
Right.
they just weren't fully healed individuals.
Mm.
So now when I look at that and I look at myself, I'm like, I'm a product of broken people.
Yes.
And even if I am a product of broken people and imperfect people, that doesn't mean that I don't have the capacity to produce something that is near perfection.
My God, you sound like you're preaching. Go ahead. Go
And
ahead.
so, I mean, I do go to get on that roll, but no. So recognize, really, I would just say recognize that they're broken, and then also recognize that what the glue is that's going to fix everyone, including yourself, is love. And
Yes.
that's what I had to do, and what I have to do still daily with my father, with my mother, with my stepfather, with my now stepmother, is to love everyone. And
Right.
that that's hard, but it helps so much, and I know that it's helping for me and it's healing me, and I know it's going to set my future marriage and my future kids up for a much better childhood than I had.
Right. Wow, that was good. That was good. I'm sure our listeners out there who can relate to it has related to it, and who, I mean, can learn from it has definitely learned from what we have discussed here. That was really good. Thank you, Jake Camille.
Thank you,
That
Jade, for
was
having
good.
me.
Yes. So we're gonna wrap right up, but tell people again where they can find you on Instagram, please.
Yes, for sure. So you guys tune into the Shift podcast, and it is the.shift.podcast on Instagram. And then it's J Camille on Facebook. That is J.CAMILLE. That's it.
Yes, and you heard it from her. So thank you guys for listening again to the Unfiltered by Jade. And we'll catch you next time, next week, Tuesday again, right here. Thank you.